You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 342. What is this? The Mandalorian, Chapter 7, The Reckoning. We're coming down to the wire. Only 2 episodes left in Season 1 as part of our revisit of The Mandalorian ahead of Season 2 starting up here in just a few weeks. And joining me tonight to help me kind of break this down is none other than Mr. Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. What's that?
Sugi.
Suga, look at your shirt there. I just realized that was the Stay on Target shirt. So
yeah,
does it have the number on there? Oh yeah, it does.
No, it says 12/2015. So this is when they again T-Fury. But yeah, when Force Awakens was announced, Stay on Target. Make sure this thing actually happens.
And did it ever? So
yeah, it's also one of my favorite just art kind of designs. I don't know if it's art or not, but I don't know. It was just always cool, little targeting computer.
Yeah, if you go out to, and I'm not plugging this, trust me, but if you go out to our T Public show page. There's we've got somebody else that we've linked their shirt on there that has like a red one. It's all red with the yellow targeting computer on it, which looks phenomenal. So highly recommend that. We get no profit from that, by the way. So just throwing that out there.
I think I went out there and actually brought that one in because it was cool.
Yeah. Wow. And we are recording this on September 20th of 2020, and tonight is the Emmys. So if you're joining us live on YouTube, Facebook Live, or Twitch TV, and you guys want to watch all that, because we're not going to have eyes for that, but certainly if there's anything that pops up in any of the major Emmy awards that come up for The Mandalorian, should they get or should they win anything, let us know. I don't know how long.
Let us know.
Yeah. I don't think we probably will be off the air before they get to the final, best show or whatever it is. I forget now the one that they're nominated for. So
right,
but yeah,
they've already won a few, so that's cool.
Yeah, I mean they got the what's his name? Got the music, and I'm gonna screw up that guy's name. All right, I forget his name now. The best. I think they won best score. I saw that Facebook and Instagram feeds are completely blowing up right now. So everybody, congratulations to everyone involved for the music. I know we've talked about the music a number of times here on the show. Very fitting, very westerny. Sounds very. What's that?
Great vibe. Yeah, fits the show's aesthetics perfectly.
Perfect. Yep, I would agree. So did a great job on that. All right, well let's do this. Let's talk about Chapter 7, The Reckoning. And this is it's kind of like a 2-parter show. And I was debating back and forth about, do we just lump them together? Do we make them separate? But figured we just separate them. There's enough here to talk about. So that's what the approach that we're taking tonight. So this opens up really with this a surprise visit, if you will, from Greef Karga to the Mandalorian. And he has a proposition to him. He wants him to return tomorrow, bring the child as bait. Karga will provide guards, and once they get close, Mando kills the client. All that seems pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Karga would get gets his city back, if you will. Now that the Imperials are all kind of running around, there's a lot more of them going on here. Mando will stop the hunters from coming. So this is he's thinking about doing this from his perspective. I need to do this in order to stop the hunters from potentially attacking the child.
Right.
And that's pretty much how it plays out. I mean, there's a couple wrinkles here and there, but I guess the biggest wrinkle was the unexpected, or maybe it wasn't so unexpected, notion that there was actually another person, right? A higher level up person, which we come to find out as Moff Gideon. But for the most part, this is exactly how it goes down.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it really does. This sequence, though, with Greef was just really odd. The performance was a little strange. It seemed a bit wooden or pre-planned. I mean, we had lots of questions as soon as we were hearing it, right? Is this legit? Mm-hmm. Is he going to backstab him? This can't be a real legit thing. And if you're thinking through it, I'm still trying to understand exactly how the Mandalorian thought this was. It wasn't maybe it wasn't so much that this is the only way to do it, but maybe this is the best way he can think of right now because what's he trying to do? He's trying to clear his name. Right. He's trying to get these guys off his back. I don't know if clearing your name is the right way to put it, but it's just something to take this heat off of him a little bit. And it's just unclear what kind of power he has in order to take care of that. I mean, he's basically wiping the slate clean, but he's still got a galaxy full of hunters that are searching for him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that does the trick though either.
Well, and
did that kind of rub you that way, or did it
does
feel like it was okay?
No, I don't know if it rubbed you the wrong way, but it does. Like, I question the decision making here. Like, really, was this the best decision? And this, it's, you're kind of touching on something that I have a problem with, because, and maybe this kind of helps to explain it. And it's just this a very simple question of Grief Karga introduces himself or greets himself as, I think he calls him friend or something like that. Like, hey, friend, buddy, whatever. And like, okay, hold up. When you guys last saw each other, I mean, he was basically trying to shoot you, and then you took a shot at him. And based on the way the conversation goes, hey, you're probably surprised to see me. We don't get no reaction from the Mandalorian. Not that we would see it if we did. So
Right.
you're left to think that he did this. He did try to shoot him and wasn't aiming for the Beskar, which we talked about. You know, there's that question of, did he know the Beskar was there? Did he aim for that and try to just incapacitate him? Or did he really try and take his life? And if you go by, he tried to take his life. Now you've got this guy calling him saying, hey, buddy, old pal. I mean, I wouldn't trust him at all, given what just happened, right? So I think it does question whether or not he was exercised the best judgment here. But then it also speaks to this idea, well, maybe they really were good friends. Like, as best friends, as good as friends as the Mando can be, still being stoic, right? And Grief Karga being who he is as the leader. I mean, there's probably some boundaries there or whatever. But maybe they did have this relationship prior to this that we don't see. And that's where he's appealing here, trying to pull at that heartstring, if you will. Other than that, I can't really think of a really good reason that he would necessarily entertain this offer. Now, I think the end result will always be the same. I think he realizes that the hunters are not going to stop until the client is dealt with and taken care of. Until that happens, this is just going to be everyday life. I don't want to go through with this. He's probably thinking about a lot of different options, but maybe it was just the convenience that this option was presented to him by Grief Karga that he decided to take it.
Right. And we're still given this idea that the client is this, for lack of a better word, a warlord who, like you were saying, is at the top of the food chain for this sector or whatever it might be, when clearly someone else is pulling the strings. We find that out pretty clearly, but it seems like someone else is trying to do this anyway, as you just kind of get this feeling. But yeah, I've never really subscribed that they're friends in any capacity. It was a friendship of convenience and of good fortune, maybe, of, he's got an ace in the hole with the Mandalorian, and he's going to bring him success and glory. I did like, though, that he still had the hole in his shirt. When he said, "You're probably surprised to see me," and you can still see the hole. I thought that was great that they brought that forward to this episode that reminds you, like, no, he really did shoot him. It wasn't pretend or anything like that.
Yeah. I thought it'd been funny if you had pointed it out, like, hey, you might be surprised to see me. Look at this. I'm still alive.
Right. But it still wasn't clear, though, if you can't gauge any facial expressions, right? Which is always difficult. And even body language. Pedro Pascal is really good at kind of hiding the body language, maybe giving you just enough to know he's doing something, but not to really cue him off on what he's doing. So you don't really know if he's surprised. I think he got a slight little head tilt. But again, maybe that was just him listening rather than being all of that surprise. Because again, I'm still kind of under the impression that he did this a bit on purpose.
Right.
Where he shot him was on purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he takes the offer, but he realizes, okay, I can't do this alone, or maybe I'm not going to go do this alone, and immediately decides he's going to go ahead and re-enlist. And this is I love TV shows, movies where there's this assembly of different people that he or she brings together. And it's just a recipe. It's a trope that's been used many times in just about every type of show, whatever that you love. But I do love the fact that what's that?
Putting together a crew.
Right. We saw that in Solo. But so his first stop is back to Sorgan. So he goes out there to pick up Kara, and she's obviously she's right in the middle of a bar fight, which I thought was kind of cool. And she seems to be enjoying herself, right? Like, she seems to be just relishing in the fact that she is getting to beat the snot out of somebody.
Get hit just as much as do the hitting.
Oh,
apparently.
yeah. I mean, and she seems to be enjoying it. Like, it's, she got hit. She turns around. You can see her smirking. She likes it. I mean, she feels alive. There's probably, I was questioning, why she would want to go here. Why wouldn't she just want to calm down and be restless? But it's probably a couple parts, right? It's probably boredom. Sit in this small, quaint town, not a lot to do. Part of it's probably income. She's probably, we saw that she's getting money from this. So that's a way to get beer money or whatever you want to call it. Swatika money. And part of it's just purpose too. Like, you think about where she's been with her life. Yeah, she's done a lot of different things. She's seen a lot of things. But what is her purpose now in life? She doesn't really have one that we know of. And maybe
Right.
this is it. This is just temporary for her, but at least it gives her something to do, something to occupy her time now that she is, quote, retired.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, what entertains her? Is she going back and forth to the village? And she's just coming into town to hang out? I mean, for an ex-drop soldier, she's probably bored off her butt most of the time with nothing really else to do. So you're right. Now they've got this little fighting thing going, a little extra money in your pocket. Someone's spiking the Spatska. So go from there. But yeah, I mean, it's just something to, I mean, it's a great, I mean, she, like you said, she feels alive. She's staying in shape and still gets to, work out some of that aggression and some of that post-traumatic trauma.
Yeah. Pent up rage.
That's redundant, post-traumatic trauma. But anyway.
Maybe. All right. So before we
go
go
that traumatic, it was worth saying twice.
There you go. Yeah. Let's, before we go any further, I thought we'd recap this because there's a lot of terminology that gets thrown at us. And some of this we've heard before, like in the Bounty Hunter series and that sort of thing. But you got pucks, you've got chits, that's CHIT. You've got chits, you've got fobs, and you have chain codes. So just quickly. So a puck is a device that has a holographic image on it with a name, maybe sometimes for those that have bounties out on them. Okay. Then you've got this little chit, which looks like a little card. Mando holds that card up and he puts it up to the little eyeball thing there at the door. And that's really just a note to kind of tell somebody that you were sent there or that you're allowed to speak to somebody about a job.
Right.
Then and you tell me if I'm wrong. This is why I'm doing this. Don't.
It's the equivalent. Yeah, it's the equivalent of like the secret password where slide the slot over.
Yeah.
What's the code?
The coffee's always hotter in Peru.
That's right.
That's from the Office. Okay.
That's false. I'm sorry.
And then there's fobs, which these are, again, the tracking devices, and they somehow hone in on like DNA patterns or radioactive dye, implants, magic, dark magic. We just have no idea how these things work, but that's what the fob does.
They home in on lazy storytelling too, I think.
Oh, pow. Shots fired. And then the last thing is a chain code. And the chain code is essentially a string of numbers, characters, that kind of give somebody the impression of like physical traits, right? Including and including like the year, like physiological traits as well. We know that the last 4 digits or 2 digits, or whatever, or how old whatever this client is as well. Did I get all that right? Does that sound right? Because there's like they just throw these words at us and they kind of expect us to understand and get all that. And we just accept it. I mean, it's really not part of the storytelling. It's not that important. But because we do a podcast on Star Wars, I figured, well, let's just talk about it, make sure we're all straight here in terms of how this stuff works.
Well, they all sound much more interesting than just saying, what's the password, right?
Yeah.
And someone saying, you shall not pass. I mean, crossing the streams a little bit here, but I mean, they just make it more exciting. And I like that. I think it's cool that you actually broke them all apart because they are all slightly unique and just a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And they do a different thing. It's not necessarily all of them aren't granting access to something. They're all, just kind of, they're just slightly different between them all, and they all have a different purpose.
Yeah.
And they're really not related at all, but you could see where some of them might be used in tandem with one another.
Yeah.
So no, I think it's really cool you brought that and kind of broke that down a little bit for us.
Well, no, thank you. And I think and one of the other reasons I want to do that was because Kara mentions that her puck couldn't be run by the New Republic, right? She says something about her chain code. Once they run her chain code, she's going to rot. She says, I'm going to rot in a cell all my life. And she says, I'm a vet, but I've done, quote, things that, could carry a life sentence is what she says. I mean, verbatim.
So is that like a barcode, like in our terms? EHX 1138 barcodes are just scanning people?
Maybe. And I thought, well, maybe it's the thing on her arm. No, that's something totally different, the tattoo. Right. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I kind of liken this to an ID number or social security number or I don't know, whatever, some type of ID, but it just has a lot more information on there than just a number. There's definitely data on there that you can go in, that you can relate to somebody and identify somebody with.
Right. But, and again, hints of something that has happened that we could, potentially explore in smaller pieces throughout season 2 that were interesting because all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, what has she actually been doing?
Yeah.
And what did she do that was questionable? And, did she take something too far? We talked about the Mandalorian and some of that from the previous episode, but now we're all of a sudden the shock trooper. And we know that, the Rebel era, people did things that were less, they weren't quite above board from what we would expect them to if we were looking back in our original trilogy days. But
yeah, like Cassian Andor, right? Shooting that guy because he really didn't have a choice and he was either get caught or continue living and taking that guy's life.
Right. So maybe this is something we'll learn a little bit more about over time, kind of like we did with, like you were pointing out last week with Poe. And again, just a little more depth of the character. And I think with Cara Dune, that's an important thing for her because we've really not seen. We've got a little bit of a flavor of what happened with her platoon and things like that.
Yeah.
But we've really not seen the emotional side of it, of where she's had to make a choice, and that choice had really dire circumstances or consequences to it.
Yeah, and on that point, just like we talked about with the Mandalorian, like, we speculated, well, maybe some of the stuff that he's done in the past are going to come back to haunt him. Maybe it's Cara. Maybe it's Cara Dune. Maybe it's the stuff that she did in the past that's going to come back to bite her or him or jeopardize missions and all that later down the road. But it is interesting that she would point this out, and I like the fact that they're adding another layer to her character, that maybe she wasn't this. I mean, because when we first saw her, I left that whole episode of thinking, well, she was a good guy and she doesn't have any work, and she was she didn't like the work that she was doing because she was a soldier and she's very noble and honorable. And I don't know, maybe that's not the case, especially if the New Republic, if she's worried about the New Republic being the ones that could lock her up and let her rot in a cell. I don't know, like some questions that I want to know more about.
Right. And we kind of thought maybe it was like desertion or something like that at one point. And now we've got this other completely different flavor. Maybe it is desertion, but maybe there's a story behind why she felt like she had to desert. And like you said, now we've got something we could really, learn something kind of meatier about her. But I think it's important that she actually, make the comments though to the Mandalorian. It does say a little bit about her character, that she was actually able to say something about it rather than, mask it and then have something blow up later on. So, but again, there's lack of judgment, I think, there too with the Mandalorian. She's like, what is this? This guy's probably done a hell of a lot of things worse than I could ever do.
Right.
So, what's the damage here? None.
Yeah, and he pitches this whole plan, right? And she seems like, I mean, at first she's like, "No, I don't want to do it. Sorry, don't want to go. I don't want to be a soldier again," is what she says. I don't want to go chase down this, warlord, whatever. And the minute he says it's an ex-imperial, I mean, you can just see her the gleam in her eye, like, "Yeah, sign me up. When do we, when can I start?" kind of thing. So,
right,
obviously this is now almost it completely changes her mind. It's almost personal at this point. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, so there was like no doubt. All of it was like a light switch for her too. And I was a little surprised at that though. I thought still she would have some hesitation, but none whatsoever. I mean, she hates these guys.
Yeah. And so they're on their way back to, I guess, Navarro. And Cara makes another comment about not, or she asks, is the client aware of who I am? And he says, well, that's not really, that's not our problem. That's his problem. If he's got a problem with you being ex-Republic. But then I guess this doesn't really play out later. Like, I thought, this would impact everything. And I'm trying to think now. I don't think even in the last episode in number 8, I don't think it does. Like, it doesn't really, I mean, she's tagged and we know, and there's like, oh, you need to hide, you need to cover up your tattoo, and they make their way into town and all that. But outside of maybe Moff Gideon knowing who she was and using that against her in some way psychologically, there really wasn't any repercussions for the fact that she was an ex-Republic or she was a shock trooper at one point.
Right. Yeah. And they played this too. I mean, they kind of set us up that it could be, but they had to wrap it. The plan that they had kind of at the last minute, that she would be the one that would have, captured him, and those types of things kind of worked. They probably looked a little bit suspicious, but they worked well enough. But she was adamant. She was like against this plan from the beginning, though. And she says it multiple times, even after we go and jump and we get Queel. But she was against it, and she does not like Grief at all, and doesn't trust him as far as she can throw him. Well, she can probably throw him quite far, but yeah, there was no love lost. She's like, just shoot this, and let's just move on with ourselves, please.
Yes, yeah, I think she smelled it coming from a long ways away.
Oh yeah,
and
he had to have too. I mean, he knew what was up.
Yeah, he did.
That's why he brought back up.
Right, he brought back up, and I think originally he was going in with just Cara. But given that, the child is up there jacking around with the equipment and nearly sent them spiraling into, whatever, he felt like, okay, I needed somebody else to kind of help protect and watch the child. I mean, I can't go in guns blazing with the child with me. That puts the kid in harm's way. And so, he starts thinking about, okay, who's the best person I could have or bring in to help protect? It's interesting that he went with Kuiil and not what's her name from Tatooine, but not that, I don't know. There's, I guess it wouldn't be the first choice, but it doesn't make for a really good storyline, right? So,
right,
he does go there.
Even the girlfriend or daughter. or something like that. Of course, it was a dangerous mission, so I could understand why some of those choices might be better. I think also, before we get too much into Queel, the child understood what they were talking about.
Oh, I got a quote. Well, do you think that? Because I know that was people
sure
have said,
seems like it though.
Yeah.
Because I was listening, so I kind of had to go back and kind of rewatch that scene briefly. And voice inflection and the way that they were talking doesn't necessarily give any indication of imminent danger or anything like that would send him into the spiral where he feels he's just got to start flipping switches all over the place. So on some level, he has to be able to understand some of basic now. At least it suggests that for him to have responded so severely. Does that am I on to something there, or am I looking a little bit
so personally, I don't. I think you're in two camps here. Either you believe the kid heard something, understood it, and decided, I'm going to take over this mission and try to get their attention or divert us away or whatever, right? That's one. The other one is, this is simply a child, and they are prone to touching and grabbing everything at all times. And it becomes a double duty. Trying to do anything with a small child, as you may know, is ridiculous. You can't. Like, it just requires, it's a whole nother level of stress and anxiety, and you're worried about them getting hurt and all that. So I don't know. I don't like, if he did hear this and decided to do something, why would he, like, of all things, why would he do that? It just, I don't understand the motive. And I guess maybe the question is, what was he trying to do? Was he trying to stop their current course to, what do you call it? Navarro. Thank you. Was he trying to stop the course to Navarro? Was he just trying to, like, wreck the ship? I mean, I don't know what his motive would have been. He didn't pull him out of hyperspace. It sounded like they were just, he pulled a brake and made them start spinning or doing whatever they were doing, but
in space. Yep. No. And again, I think he was just flipping switches of whatever happened just to try to, I don't know. So we keep calling him a baby, and actually the client calls him a baby. Mm-hmm. A number of people call him a baby. And while he's not a baby necessarily, but he is maybe, I think you and I have kind of agreed, he's basically a toddler of sorts. Yep. So he understands enough, but maybe he doesn't know how to, express any of that. So it's just anxiety and freaking out, where he's just arbitrarily flipping anything that does it. I mean, we kind of see that he's just yanking on whatever he can. It seems more like a tantrum than anything remotely tangible or thought. I mean, he's not actually got a true plan. He's just like, I just got to do something. Like, what do I got to do? I know how to, if I push these buttons, I know stuff happens because I've flipped it before and stuff happened. So let me go up here and just flip a bunch of stuff, and then we can just stop this all together. So I don't think there was any, like, motive of, like, oh, I can't go there, I got to, disable the ship or anything. He's just,
right, just a cry for attention, if you will.
Right. And again, an outlet for anxiety of, how do I stop what we're about to do? And that's what he's capable of doing in this moment.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I can see.
Capable of more,
see
but we didn't get there yet.
No, I know. And I definitely see both sides. And I don't know that it really makes a difference one way or the other, but or maybe it does. I mean, I think if you go by the camp, if you were in the camp that he heard, he understood, he took action, then yes, that says a lot about what he actually is hearing and what he does actually understand, which, right, maybe we see a little bit more of in season 2. So they end up, either way, they go back to, is it Arvel 7, the planet where Queel's on? Yeah. And Queel sees him and says, child hasn't aged much at all. Mando says that he thinks it's a clone. He calls it a strand cast, which I don't remember that term ever being used. I forgot to go do research on that, so I do apologize for that. But I can't remember if that term had actually been used before, a strand cast. But Queel says that it's not a clone, and he's not engineered, that he actually has a life, a past life, where either he was working, I think he said he's working the gene farms, right? Mm-hmm. And just, says that, hey, no, this thing's not a clone. It's natural. And he says it's been evolved. It's, too ugly is what I think is what he says. But this goes back to the whole, if you go back to the client's assistant there, Dr. whatever, Zhivago, whatever his name was, that doctor, with that patch, and we talked to the speculation around that about whether or not that was in Camino. We've seen a planet now in season 2 that looks like it's on water. Maybe that's Camino, but maybe there is a trail here with cloning, and maybe there isn't. But I think that's where this was going. I think they were trying to maybe was this a red herring in some way?
I think a little bit, because I think we landed, I think, where the doctor was trying, or at least what they were commissioned to do, was to potentially clone whatever this species is.
Yeah.
So I think, again, I still fall in that camp that they were trying to take what it has, learn from it, possibly replicate it or produce it or do something with it, maybe for the emperor or whatnot. But those types of things seem more likely than an exceptionally rare species, at least what we believe is exceptionally rare. And for that to be a clone seems very unlikely because really the only way they would be able to do that was to actually have some sort of sample. Now, I want to put the hats on.
Okay.
Mr. Padilla. They could have had access to Yoda's cloak and other effects of Yoda's, right? To actually have DNA samples and presumably even Yaddle, right? So I think all of that is actually, it's possible. All of it's plausible that they could have done something to replicate. The problem is the age of the child at 50 years old. At 50 years old, a lot of this all of this stuff predates even Phantom Menace. Is that right? Roughly. Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So we would have, that something like that that Yoda would have been able to allow something like that seems unlikely to me. Given the control they had on the Jedi Temple, Palpatine was not in powers. He didn't have access to a lot of things. So a lot of things that have to line up just aren't there in order to actually clone one of the species that we know existed at the time back in that era.
Yeah. And
I'll stop there.
Well, no, that's fine. No, it's all fair
Dr.
point.
Pershing, thank you, Music Train.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not in the he's a clone camp of any sort. He's an offspring of Yoda. I'm not in any of that stuff. I mean, I get it. There's certainly strong arguments for all of that stuff, but I don't know. It doesn't feel like that's the story right now. Maybe the story is they want to clone this thing, but I don't believe that it is a clone. So again, I think it's a red herring, and I think it was interesting. I do wonder if they were going to go, he makes a comment about Cara looking perfect, basically. He's like taking a page right out of Lando's book in wooing women, right? He's kind of appealing to how good she's looking. And he says that she was, she was born or raised in the Kaito caves of Nora, which is probably a throwaway reference. Maybe we never hear it again about it again in Star Wars, but makes me wonder like, oh, okay, are they planting seeds that we're going to go back to the Kaito caves? Should there be some cloning aspect of all this? Maybe we do go back to the Kaito caves of Nora, wherever that is, and we get to see what that looks like. But
I don't know why I had this visual of like mermaids to Quill, like that this was like a mermaid to him, of just something this spectacular creature that he needs to to adore and to flaunt over and whatnot.
He's a little ladies man, huh? We don't know. Right. We don't know.
But it was a curious comment though of that the child hasn't grown much, because I was trying to think how long has it been? We know that Cara and the Mandalorian were
out there for weeks, months almost.
Yeah, we know they were probably out there for a few weeks, maybe a month or something like that on the planet. And so presumably there's been some other time between all of that. So are we kind of in the camp that's been maybe a few standard months, something like that? Since
3 to 6 months.
Right.
But I think what his thinking was, if it was a clone, then it would be accelerated growth, right? And so when he looked at it and saw, hasn't really grown much, it's not a clone then. Otherwise, I think he was expecting to see this thing a lot older. Although I don't know how he would determine that since he's never seen one before. How would you gauge whether this thing's aged or not? Right.
And again, they were speculating, they knew that these things age at different, they mature, whatever you want to call it, at different paces and different scales and things like that. So maybe he was, you're mentally thinking, well, a child has these growth spurts, and especially at this age, they're changing quite rapidly. But he's 50, and he still looks like he's two or 3 or whatever, or 5, right. whatever we came to, and yeah, again, probably not expecting much change there. But again, it was an interesting comment, especially we weren't really sure how long they've been gone for.
Yeah. We get the return of IG-11, now a nursing and protocol droid. And I mean, it was really cool. I mean, we were all worried that was all we were going to get. Although I think we had some, I think in the teasers or something, we had one of the trailers, we had known that he was going to come back in some way, in some capacity. I love the fact that it was Quill that actually brought him back to life and reprogrammed him and did all that. It makes complete sense given, what we know from that species from like Empire Strikes Back. But the question I have for you is just really, it's almost superficial, but there's been a lot of montages, and we've joked about them on the show before. They definitely delve into a lot of flashback stuff. Maybe we see flash forward stuff in this series. Does this ever feel like it's out of line for you? What in terms of what you think is like Star Wars, or is this like, it's fine, totally, let's roll with it, keep going with it? Because I know there are people that are like, this isn't Star Wars. Star Wars doesn't do flashbacks. They don't do slow motion. They don't do this. They don't do that. And that's certainly George Lucas's style, but we're long past all that. We've got all kinds of new directors and writers and influencers in Star Wars. And I don't know. How do you feel about all this?
I'm not really sure how I feel, because I've been a bit critical of the montages in general, because they do feel, I don't know, some feel Rocky Balboa-ish, and then some of them feel okay. Like this is kind of how you do a montage. And I thought this one was okay. I like the narrative over top of it, though. And I think that's why I was okay with it. As he was kind of telling the story about, how this was, and we got to see a couple kind of comedic elements of it as well, of the learning of the droid. I think I was really more enraptured with a droid having to learn how to function again. I mean, this is completely different than any other droid that we've seen, where it's actually learning how to walk and to think effectively and recognize things and do things that are different. We usually equate this with machines, like, okay, it either walks or it doesn't walk, right? And you program it to tell it to do one thing, it will do the one thing. You don't then tell it to do something different and it changes its own programming. So this really had a completely different flair of what our droids like semi-sentient in some way. Yeah. And it was just really interesting watching and listening to this, that this is where it was, that this thing was capable of it. And what I didn't understand was, is this unique to the IGs, or is this droids in general on some level?
Yeah, that's a great point. And one maybe unique to Quill, maybe unique to his abilities. Maybe he's just that good that he's able to program these things to the point where they do take on more humanistic characteristics and personality traits, that kind of thing. Because he even says, when he's talking about rebuilding the droid, he says it took on a personality, is what Quill says. Yeah. Right. And then he says that it was patience and affirmation. This was what he used to build the droid, right? And that's like, okay, wait a minute. That's patience and affirmation. So patience meaning you're going to allow this thing to make mistakes. You're going to encourage it, tell it it's fine, tell it's okay, keep going. And then affirmation is, I mean, that's a humanistic characteristic, like you being told you did a great job. And robots and droids, they don't work that way unless they've got some kind of a soul in them, right? To be able to say, okay, yeah, I can do this, that kind of thing. That's why you affirm people, to help them feel better, right? And those are the traits. Those are exactly what Korea was using here. And then this all kind of contradicts itself. I shouldn't say contradict, but it's a little different later on in, I think it's in the next episode, in the final episode, when IG-11 keeps talking about, I'm not alive, I'm just a droid. This is what I meant to do. And the Mando of all people is the one that's really feeling it, right? And feeling that this thing is alive, or having feelings for this thing because of what he's done and the personality and the character traits it's been able to display and convey over these last two episodes. So it's a very interesting, and it's not unique.
Sequence, the whole sequence was just it kind of turned what we thought about, inorganics kind of on our head, of where we actually consider them in the same realm as an organic, of learning. And like you said, affirmation. I mean, you have to, like you said, affirmation only works if you can feel that positive support, and that you feel someone is, kind of with you on the path.
Right. And this is the first droid. But I mean, you could argue C-3PO is in this camp, R2-D2 is in this camp. There is R2-D5. I mean, that's a whole nother level when you look at certain point of view novel, the novelization there. Yeah. There's plenty of instances like that, but we've just never seen one have to learn how to do things again. Yeah.
When 3PO gets rebooted, he's functional. He just doesn't have memories.
All right.
Anyway, all right. Well, we've beaten droids to death, I think, but so it's kind of it was an interesting thing to see on screen and actually be semi-addressed, or at least more poignantly posed on the big screen, if you will.
Yeah.
Compared to books or whatever mediums, that they've come up in other ways.
Okay. So there was one other thing that I lifted from this sequence as well. And it's Quill talking about how he found the droid, he reprogrammed it, and he says he did so based on the charter of the New Republic. And I'm assuming just on that line alone, okay, so if you pick up a droid, it's like in Texas, if you run something over with your car, you get to keep it. That's a joke. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I like finders keepers is what it felt like to me.
Right. So he's able to pick it up. But then I started questioning, okay, well, that makes sense. So they've got a charter of the New Republic. But I said, wait, hold on a second. Why is that so important? Like of all the things that, and we know what the charter, we know, well, not, I shouldn't say that. We know some of the things from the Charter of the New Republic, like if, go back to Bloodlines, right? Mm-hmm. Leia couldn't be held responsible for the sins of her father, right? That was one of the things that came out of the Charter of the New Republic, is that a sibling or a child, daughter, whatever, from somebody that did something really awful can't be held accountable for those crimes if that person is no longer around. That's like a real weighted, debatable thing that has substance and definitely something you would want to put in a charter. At some point, though, I mean, is this thing that long where they had to go in and say, oh, and by the way, on top of all these other really, controversial and type things, if you find a droid, you get to keep it, because that's been going on for a lot and there's really no law and we just want to nip it in the bud at this point. I don't know. It's interesting that they quoted that of all things. Right.
And this feels like the Wild West. So why would you even care about rules? I mean, he lives on the outskirts.
Yeah.
And there's no, this whole place feels lawless to me. Does it feel lawless to you for the most part?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I just don't understand why this is even important to bring up. It was just a curious comment and I don't know. Now all of a sudden we care about the Republic. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
Or maybe he was showing that he is just a law-abiding citizen, and he didn't want people to think he did anything kind of fishy here. So he's had to point out that in accordance with the Charter of the New Republic, I did exactly what I was allowed to do within my rights, that kind of thing. But I don't know.
He could have just said, no one was alive to stop me. So I just kind of collected the trash and left.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, we've killed that horse too. So the other thing he says is droids aren't good or bad. He says they're neutral reflections of those who imprint them. And this harks back to the Karate Kid, not to channel again the basement, but I think of the Karate Kid where he meant, Miyagi says there's no such thing as a bad student, only bad teachers, right? Mm. And that's kind of what the message is here, is that all droids are just really, they're good or evil because of the people that program and the people that get their hands on them. Beyond that, it's, they are neutral for the most part.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then Mando says he's seen otherwise, and he doesn't really elaborate on that. My only assumption is he's seen droids like IG-88 and some of these other ruthless killing droids that seem to like to almost relish in killing people or death and destruction and that kind of thing that goes beyond what somebody would normally program to do. Like they've taken on these lives, they've taken on these personalities where they enjoy that. They're psychopaths, right?
Maybe he's come across 000.
Let's say 000 is like prime
example. We know he hasn't, by the way. Well, yeah. Actually, we don't know that.
No, I don't know. Well, yeah, no, we don't.
I'm trying to remember where Trip landed after all of that.
So I'm assuming that's what we get. So hopefully they play on that here later. That'd be kind of cool to see some of that.
Yeah. I don't believe him, by the way. I don't think he's seen that.
Okay. Going against the grain.
Right.
Kuil's in as well. So he's got his third, fourth members now. Says he's going to join, and he's joining simply because he doesn't want this child to end up in a life of servitude to the Empire. He really wants to ensure that. And again, he makes it personal. So Kara is in this for personal reasons. Mando's in this for personal reasons. Now you've got Kuil in this for personal reasons. And you could argue that even IG-11 at the very end, some of the decisions he makes are most personal to some extent. But we'll get to that when we get to the final chapter here.
Right. And we start to see a theme with Kuil, though, about, the skill of his hands and some of his history of his life of servitude and how he came into it and how he got out of it as well. And, and some of the points that he has, because Kara's kind of on Team Kuil a little bit for a while here. And then they have a lot of conflict until, he wants to prove himself to her. So it was kind of interesting how that went.
Yeah. All right. We get back on the Razor Crest. And again, I don't know if you caught this, but when they get back on the Razor Quest, the camera's panning back. We see the blurgs. They're sitting there and they're eating stuff. Kuil pulls out like this tube, and it's a long tube. On one end, it's got like a flashlight kind of almost connected to the tube. Mm-hmm. And he starts puffing on this thing. And they never explain what it is. I went back and looked at I couldn't even, when I was Googling, I was finding stuff I didn't really want to know about. But yeah, so there was nothing I could find on what this tube was that he was. And again,
it's like a hookah.
Yeah. It's a hookah lounge type thing, or is it a breathalyzer? Was he low on oxygen? Maybe Ugnaughts don't breathe oxygen and he needed this thing. But if you go, we're not going to dig into this, and I don't really want your opinion on this. Not that this sounds terrible. I didn't mean that. I just meant if you're watching this show right now, listening to this podcast, Go back and watch and look what I'm talking about. He's got this weird translucent tube with a flashlight at the very end. He's like puffing on it. So
you are not the first person to bring this up, Albert. So rest assured, you are not alone.
Is it a bong? That's what I want to know. I don't know. Maybe it is. All right, we'll move on. So we get to they're doing their little arm wrestling thing, going over the top there, if you will. Another 80s reference. And the child lashes out, like he sees Mando, looking in pain, or at least he can hear him sounding like he was struggling, maybe in pain. He's not sure what's going on. And so he instinctively reacts. And this goes back to what we were talking about a couple episodes where this child really could go one way or the other. Right? He doesn't know what's good, what's bad. And he's just using what's, talents that are given to him, or the things that come natural to him. And maybe one of his natural abilities is to force choke somebody, which we always associate with the dark side, although Luke does it in Return of the Jedi. But traditionally, that's something we would reserve, or think that only somebody that was on the path of the dark side, or was able to harness the dark side, would be capable of doing. But any thoughts around that, and whether or not that we're going to see more of these kind of dark acts, because he's just a child and he is very force sensitive and very force powerful.
Right. And again, fear and anger, right? Those are the things that will help manifest some of those stuff. And I mean, so it made sense that he was concerned. What the thing I had a question for you though, Albert, was on why now, compared when the Mandalorian and Kara were fighting and they were rolling around and everything else, why that seemed way more intense. And he was just cool, just sipping a bowl, and enjoying his lunch. But that was okay. And that was cool. I mean, maybe we're in a different place relationship wise to where he's more, but he's seen her before.
Sure.
And knew that they were friends.
Buddies.
Right. So it was a bit of a disconnect for me of like, why now is this a problem when it made a whole lot more sense that he would force choke her later? I mean, granted, how do you stop that? Yeah. And it makes more sense from that respect. But that was a bit of a disconnect for me of like, why now? And why, it didn't really seem like it was in that much turmoil. It didn't seem like he was in any kind of mortal danger to where you would elicit that type of reaction. But do you have any thoughts around that for us?
I think, no, nothing that really makes sense. For me, it just seems like it's a matter of story convenience. Like they've got to be able to, they want to keep hitting this idea that they're going to have to in season 2. And again, we're at the very last 2 episodes of the season. So they've got to start planting these seeds about what to look forward to and maybe where this goes. Because right after that, we get Kuiil saying that he's seen this, he's heard rumors of the Force and heard rumors of the Jedi before. And then couple that with the armorer saying you need to take this child back to, these sorcerers. And we get the if you look at the trailer that we got for season 2, right, there's that voiceover of them. So they're replaying all of that. So I think it was just a matter of convenience to kind of plant the seed and say, here's where we're going. Is it the strongest argument for the child to react in the way he does? No, probably not. I think you've done a great job of proving that. I think there may have been other opportunities that they could have wrote in this, but given the constraints of the show and where they were, it felt like that this is like the moment they would do it. I don't know. I don't really have a good reason. I can't justify it really that well, I guess.
Well, and again, we do get to see the dichotomy, the dual aspect of this, of the fear and the anger compared to what we see from him later on with the compassion side of things.
Yeah.
And the willing, somewhat of sacrifice. Right.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a good, way to see different aspects of things. I thought that was nice. It was cool to see some of these other abilities come out though. So cool factor was definitely there.
Sure.
But some of the story factor, little hard to really grab onto and kind of get all the way there with what they were trying to accomplish on the writing.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool and relatable. Like we all had a reaction. We saw like, whoa, I mean, who else have we seen use force chokes, right? Outside of, Vader was predominantly all he used. And then we had that one time with Luke, but at that point we had justified with the fact that he was kind of in the neutral zone, or maybe he was a little bit darker now, that kind of thing. So it was a good way to at least get our attention, right?
Right.
So, and then Kuiil and Kara go back and forth, and we'll just kind of summarize this. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're really all in line with one another. I don't think she trusts him. He doesn't trust her, especially given that he was ex-Empire, although he tries to make his defense about, look, that wasn't my choice. I didn't sign up to be the Empire. Yeah, I was sold. And she's almost coming across like, well, you should have done something about that. Even if you were sold, you probably had a choice. You could have done something about it. You chose to do it, right? So there's I wouldn't say there's bad blood here, but it's their paths, right? Their past experiences that are coming in and impacting this relationship they're trying to start. And Mando's just kind of caught in the middle of it. And he's trying to move it on. He's like, okay, let's move on. We don't need, let's not, kill each other over this. But I do like this. And it's a shame that we don't get to see more of that, right? We don't really get to see much of it play out because he dies at the end of this episode. But it would have been interesting had he lived to see that continue, that struggle, almost kind of like Kanan Jarrus and Rex in Star Wars Rebels. They first met, they were at each other's throats. At least Jarrus didn't trust Rex whatsoever. And it wasn't until way later that they trusted each other to no end. I mean, they really were really good friends by the end of that series. But well, let's talk about them getting back to Navarro. Karras' Republic lost a lot of forces there. The city's dug pretty deep, so that's why they have to land so far away from the main part of Navarro. They've got to trek in. They can't just drop into one of the ports or whatever. And that the Empire, she mentions
hold
on.
There was a shipyard though in the earlier episodes, right?
Stop it! You're thinking about this yard.
No, I actually had to answer this question because
okay.
They had the park so far out because I guess they would recognize the Razor Crest, right?
Right. Yes, it's a wanted ship. They know what it is.
Now, why these guys didn't take a speeder or commission something, didn't really think ahead on that one. But
yeah, and the way I was trying, and you're right, and the way I thought about that is, well, even still, they could have done this. I mean, again, we're nitpicking, but like they were going to off these people anyways, right? That was the plan, is they were going to kill them. So they could have still brought a speeder out and said, oh no, don't worry, we've got a transporter, we've got a speeder to take you in and pop them off there before they get in. But
maybe that's what was supposed to happen at the campfire after everyone went to sleep.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Not that our heroes were going to go to sleep, but
yeah. Let's see, and then she also mentions the Empire has had control over this town ever since the end of the war. So it's been predominantly an Empire-run town for the most part. Mando doesn't want IG-11 to leave the ship, and turns out that IG-11 ends up being saves everybody because he does leave the ship. So there's a little bit of irony there a little bit later. Let's see. So they get there, they meet up with Grief Karga and his two guys. They've got their security detail. Mando's brought his. Karga then says that, hey, you need to cover up your tattoo. Is it just because she's Empire? And what's that?
Yeah, don't flaunt it. Well, I think they would have definitely triggered the Empire when they got to the gates.
Yeah.
So it just made sense. Yeah, you don't want to. There's no reason to flaunt your colors if you and just start trouble. And quite honestly, she looks like she would just start trouble just for the fun of it if she could.
Well, I think we've seen that too.
Oh yeah.
And then Karga asks to see the child. And part of this is like, okay, well, maybe he just wants to verify that they do have the child before they go any further, so he doesn't have egg on his face when they get there. And there is no child, but Mando seems okay with it. Like, it's not even like here, you can see it, don't touch it. Because again, I'm still like, I don't see why they would trust each other. And this is where the question comes in. But not only does he allow him to see the child, but he allows him to pick the child up, which I'm like, no, why would he do that? So
and you got your hand on your blaster. You're not okay with it. Why are you allowing just back it up? Just back it up 6 feet, man. Social distance this guy.
I don't know. It's
a year from now, that joke is not going to make sense.
It's not going to hold up well. No, it probably won't. All right. Well, they get to the campfire, and we get confirmation the child's a carnivore. We kind of already knew this since he was eating frogs earlier on in the season. But all right, great, nice confirmation there. I think of the Yoda saying, "How did you get so big eating food of this kind?" and that sort of thing. I'd always assumed that he was just a vegetarian, given what he was eating, which was like weeds and broth. But Karga thinks that.
We know Yoda was killing animals with a bow and arrow.
Well, that we knew that. I'm saying when you go back to Empire, though, first time seeing Empire back in the 80s, I just thought he was eating shrubbery and stuff. It was, the comic book, we know he's actually hunting game with a bow and arrow.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I thought he was eating soup and beans.
Soup and beans. It's a diet of...
Working on his Cajun.
Yeah, maybe. Karga thinks that they want him for this. He calls it a highfalutin menagerie, which... Karga's lines in this, by the way, like, I know Favreau writes this. I think he wrote this one as well, but some of his lines and the word choices he uses are like, whoa, him and the client are both like not down to earth kind of speaking guys at times. But he calls it a highfalutin menagerie, which is a fancy way of saying it's a fancy exhibit. So I guess he's thinking they're going to put him in some kind of a fancy zoo and put him on display for people to see.
Why would it? No, it was just dumb. I'm sorry. It was just dumb. I mean, this comment makes absolutely no sense. I don't know if he's just being a smart aleck about it all, or if he really believes this, because if he really believes this, my opinion of this guy just dropped considerably. Because why would an Imperial be going to dump a ton of money into this? Yeah. And why would the Imperials be like running a circus effectively?
Mm-hmm.
It's just okay.
All right. Well, they go over the plan. They go over the plan, and he mentions it's all ex-Empire people that they're when they get there, there's like 4 guards and
right.
And he says as soon as they lose a paycheck, they're all going to leave, saying that once they get rid of the client, the town's going to go be free and liberated. And I think this kind of plays again to what we were seeing with when we talked about when we did the trailer breakdown for season 2, and we said that Grief Karga looks like he's in a more mayoral role of some sort. I think this is where this comes in. I think they're kind of foreshadowing that once the client is gone, the Empire is gone, then that means that opens up new opportunities for somebody to step up and kind of take back this town or take it over in kind of a different way. So
did you really feel like he was being truthful with all of this, though, throughout this? Because we know they were being duplicitous already.
Yeah.
But did we really think that there were really only 4 Imperials that were going to... I mean, I guess he was really talking about around the client, which ended up being true for a time. So he didn't really lie about that. But it still... I mean, we know that they were still going to double-cross him, but it still seemed like it was just too easy. Like, we just dismiss all of this of like, you cut off the head and everybody scatters and it'll be fine.
I think it was a half truth that he was telling in order to ensure that they continue to stay dedicated to going to the client and handing out or going through with the plan. I think if he had said, no, man, there's like at least 8 once we get in, and before we even get there, they've got a whole, battalion of them sitting out here, or maybe not a battalion, but a squad of them sitting out at the gates, and we're going to have to get through all those. I think if he had said that, they'd have been like, okay, wait, time out. Let's redo this plan. And so I think it was a half truth. Yeah, 4 is what I've seen around him. And the truth comes out a little bit more right later on, because they questioned, like, I thought you said it was going to be 4. And he clarifies, well, I meant 4 around him, not all over the place and in this town. So again, I think he was just doing that to ensure that they continue to stay dedicated and didn't get scared and run or change the plan in some way that wouldn't benefit him later. Mm-hmm. They get attacked by these creatures. I've heard people say they're Minox. They don't look like Minox to me at all. And
look more like dragons.
Sure. I'll go with that. They look Charizard from Pokemon, but they look like dragons of some sort, right? They're coming in, swooping down, which I think is a great shot. I mean, we don't need to talk about all this, but I thought it was a great sequence. It was a lot longer than I would have expected it to be too, which I thought was cool. We got to see the Mando react and use a lot of his weapons. We got to see Cara Dune do the same thing. These things weren't just coming in and attacking them. They were actually after the blurgs and trying to take those and lift those like, dragons lifting up cattle if you do that D&D type stuff.
And we learned that Republic soldiers are apparently just as poor a shot as Imperial.
Right. Not a one of these things was... I think they took down one. They took down one that was on the blurg on the far right.
Right. But how did they miss the...
they're huge. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Not a single one seemed to hit, except for the one that they killed, that crushed the blurg, I guess.
Yeah. Because, the blurg died as well.
That one didn't.
And Grief through this gets hurt. He's poisoned. He's been cut. And we get and this is right on the heels, or I think right just before The Rise of Skywalker came out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it was about a month. Was it about a month? Yeah,
maybe.
Somewhere a month or a few weeks, away from Rise of Skywalker, yeah.
So we had already gotten that there was something in this. If you followed spoilers, we were told at the time that there was something that was going to happen in this episode that we would see again in The Rise of Skywalker. And it turns out it was just this healing thing that he was done, which it was basically 2 things. It was force healing and it was a detoxification. He not only did he cure the wound, but he detoxified the poison, which I want to say, by the way, that's all. We've seen that many times in Legends, these powers. We've seen them in the old Star Wars RPG by West End Games. Those are 2 powers you can have as a force user. But I think so it was all really great to see. And we got to see, again, another level of power from the child. I think the standout line was, he's trying to eat me, which is what Grief Karga screams when he says it. I know that line wasn't delivered the best, but I still laugh every time I hear it.
I don't have words, Robert. I'm sorry.
Okay, then just focus on the powers then.
It was cool to see. I mean, and again, the child just, again, selfless and just walks up and they all allow him space to do his thing, not knowing, having any idea what's going on. But again, the child just has this innate knowledge, or maybe he's just compelled, or has maybe the force is willing him to go and do these things. And because otherwise you wouldn't expect a young child to have this kind of cognizant ability of being able to say, hey, I can probably do this. Let me go try it. Let me go channel all of this. And that was less than clear. Now, again, it was a nice, while it was really on the nose for what Rise of Skywalker is going to show us as well, I liked that we didn't really get all of the flavor of it. Although we get, like, looking at it retrospectively, we still see that it did take something out of the child to do this.
Yeah.
And then we later on, of course, got the explanation from Rey that she had to transfer a bit of her life force in order to do this. And there's a price for it. And so it's curious to see what that price doesn't really seem to have affected the child at all. And granted, child's growing, so
he's young, full of vigor.
Yeah, he'll grow some more.
Right.
Make some more. I'm going to make some more life force later on.
Yeah, it's like when a kid, like a real life kid, falls down, and you think, oh my gosh, they're hurt, and they bounce back, or their bones heal, so much faster than our bones, or at least my bones heal. Part of that's there's some physiological stuff that's happening there that I'm sure is related to the force as well.
Right.
And we get and all this plays out a little bit later because it really does change Grief Karga's mindset. It really changes everything about the plan, which we'll talk about. And originally, again, they were going to do a double. We fast forward to them. They're standing there right before the town. He's like, well, this is it. And we get the double cross happening with Grief Karga, where he turns around, takes 2 shots at the hired men that he had, the bounty hunters or mercenaries or whatever it was they had with them, kills those guys. And but then he basically tells them that, look, I had given what happened last night, I've changed my mind. I'm a good person now. We still need to go through with this plan. It's still better. The plan doesn't change. You still need protection. You need to protect the child. No other way to do that than get rid of the client. I want my town back. I'll restore your good name, all that. So he's really trying to sell him on all this. And Kara doesn't really want any part of this. Kind of what we were talking about earlier. She's like, no, kill him. Get rid of him. This is stupid. Why are we doing this? He's already double crossed us. So that was a good moment. It was one of the more dramatic moments, I think, that we've had between the 3 of those main characters talking about what was going to happen there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit predictable, I guess, in that regard. I still didn't quite understand the motive very well as to how this was better and what that showed him, aside from having a heart, maybe. I mean, I'm still trying to understand what extra does he benefit from this now that he's seen the ability of the child compared with what his original plan was. The original plan was still to go in there and kill him. I guess if they're going to kill him prematurely. Well, I guess if they're going to kill him prematurely, they weren't going to rid them of the Imperials, I suppose.
Probably.
Yeah. I got myself there.
All right. No, that's good. And part of it is just, I think, him being like, hey, this is now twice that I've had my life saved, or twice I've almost died, and the constant is Mando and the child, and I'm going to change my ways, kind of thing. Not explicitly said, but part of that probably played into it.
But they still had to put a lot of trust in Karga in order to do this. Now, granted, they changed the plan, sent the child back, but they still had to put a lot of trust in him, considering they were still walking into an Imperial stronghold. Granted, they didn't know just how much of a stronghold it really was still.
Yeah. So they get into the belly of the beast, right? They head into the town, and there's obviously a lot more than just 4 guards. They're noticing people just standing around there. They get checked by one of the scout troopers, and he's reading off somebody's chain code, which we talked about at the very beginning. I don't know whose chain code he was reading. I don't know if it was Grief's. I assume it's Grief, since Grief is the one that had his.
Right.
Yeah, but I guess the more important thing is that they do make mention that ever since Mando crashed the safe house, that a lot more of the Imperial guards had shown up. And so maybe to Grief's credit, maybe he wasn't aware that there were actually this many that showed up, because he does feel like, you can tell he's looking around like, holy crap, how are we going to pull this off? There's a lot more of them than there are of us.
Right. And it seems like he's been a bit displaced as well, entirely. Like, they're not the guild operations, and I think he says this, guild operations have basically been shut down. They've scattered. The work is dried up. Yep. So it makes a lot of sense. He doesn't know what's going on, and he's on the outsides now looking in. His status has definitely been, basically just completely eliminated.
Yep. We get to the very last part of this episode where we're going to end, but this is back with the client. There's a lot of great lines and a lot of great dialogue here. from
Show
the
me
client.
the baby.
Show me the baby, which is now a meme, like meme sensation everywhere. But he's admiring the Beskar. You know, he wants to pour a drink to kind of celebrate this moment with Grief Karga. And
Man, creepy dad moment though, or creepy uncle moment where he's like reaching up to his face and like,
he's all seeping with creepiness.
How is that okay, Mando?
I don't know. Beskar,
that's a lot of control, man.
Yeah, he is creepy. He says, why did, or I guess he mentions that Mandalore should have never resisted the expansion. And so all of this kind of goes back to the Siege of Mandalore, right? I think of Siege of Mandalore. I think of the events right after what we saw from the last season of Clone Wars, the final episodes there, and referencing that they didn't allow for the expansion. And if you think about like what we saw in the, even in Clone Wars and Rebels, they did go along with this to some extent, right? But maybe just never not as far, right? And I don't know what this is yet because this is all still to be determined. I think we'll probably get some of this if they continue to touch on the Siege of Mandalore, post Siege of Mandalore, and what exactly happened to Mandalore and how they did fall, what the purge was, to what extent the purge was. But the question I have is like, what was it an expansion of? Was it just an expansion of the Empire, allowing them to expand into Mandalore and really embed themselves in Mandalore like they had never done before, or something else?
That's how I took it. You know, they were expansion mode. We know the Empire had to have control, and you have to control the ones, the hot spots where you know you're going to have the most difficult time controlling it. And so it makes a lot of sense they had to exert a lot of force, especially because they knew Mandalore was not going to take it sitting down at all. And quite honestly, I don't really know how much they negotiated any of this either. But again, we know Mandalorians typically aren't going to take any rule. And we saw that even with Satine, you know, where they resist outside help all the time. They don't want to acknowledge the rest of the Republic, even back in the Clone War era. So it's not surprising that they wouldn't want any kind of interference from the outside, because they were largely just saying, we'll take care of ourselves and we want to be our own autonomous thing. We'll handle it. So it makes perfect sense that they would resist all of this. But it was nice to get a little bit of a flavor of, you know, again, this imperial idealism of, you know, where we're restoring peace to the galaxy, you know, then everything since then has gone to crap, you know, since the revolution and all of that. So, I mean, it's a nice flavor to have, but I'm ready for them to actually give us something of substance now. We've kind of whetted our appetite enough. We've talked about the purge. We've talked about the imperial expansion now. We've talked about, hey, they should have made different choices. You know, we've made creepy comments about his armor a couple of times now. So can we get something now of substance that actually tells us what the heck happened and what was significant about the event, how we decimated the Mandalorian numbers and even the culture at this point. So I think I'm ready for that. I'm tired of the teases now. I'm sufficiently ready. They got me there. Now let's actually deliver on this.
Okay. So I want to read something the client says quickly, and I want you to answer this or answer a question. He says, the Empire improves everything it touches, judged by any metric: safety, prosperity, trade, opportunity, peace. Compare imperial rule to what is happening now. Is the world more peaceful since the revolution? Now, we've talked about this. The Empire, Galactic Empire, love it or hate it, it is a huge and has been a very huge pillar holding up this galaxy in a lot of different ways in a lot of different areas. And it's gone now, right?
Right.
So is he wrong on any of these accounts? Is he wrong on all of them, some of them, none of them?
Well, it's about how you do it. So if you're using tyranny and fear in order to accomplish all of those things, going to go out on a limb and say it's wrong. And that you shouldn't, I mean, that's not how you want to inspire your people. And again, is peace meaning you don't accept any other opinions? Because we know they dissolved the Senate. Sure. So there's not like there's representation or anything.
Right. Yep.
So it's easy to claim you have peace if you are just whipping everyone into shape and whipping them into place. And I mean, this is why people revolt. So you have peace for a while because you are delusional and you think you've created it, but what you have done is you've created pockets of resistance and rebellion. I've hit both terms now. We're good. But so they're right from their perspective, but from the reality of it, people are going to fight oppression and they're going to fight tyranny, because it's basically you are taking people's ability to have their own personal integrity. You've taken that away from them.
Yeah, free will, and it's agency.
Right. Exactly. At some point, they are going to revolt to try to reclaim that.
Yep. I agree. Okay. The last thing, or I guess Moff Gideon flies in on his Outland TIE fighter, which is really cool. I think we've talked about that design already. Maybe we haven't. Did we see that before? No, we haven't.
No, this is the first time. Yep.
First time we'd seen it. Yeah. So I think this was a throwaway design. I hate to say throwaway because nothing's a throwaway in Star Wars, but I think it was a design that was originally supposed to be for The Force Awakens. And so they repurposed that TIE fighter here and gave it to him, which I think is awesome. It looks great. But he flies in and he comes out and we get a great performance. I think, I mean, I love Esposito's work. Everything he's ever done, I've always enjoyed. And so I'm really looking forward to him in season 2, but he does mention that, he knows that they don't have the child. And I guess the question is, how does he know that? And maybe the obvious answer, and just keep me in check here, I think the obvious answer is the fob, or he's got a fob of some sort, knows that the child isn't in the vicinity. And so, and that's essentially why he doesn't just barge in there and open fire on them and doesn't try to do anything, because he knows that maybe the child is there. Maybe if they don't know exactly where it's at, then he's going to need them and extort them in some way to give up the location of the child.
Right. And I'm with you, because it didn't make sense. The scout troopers didn't know to go look for the child until they intercepted the Mandalorian's message.
Mm-hmm.
So if Gideon knew all of this, what was he actually doing about it? Because there was no evidence that he was doing really anything about it. So that was kind of what I was going to ask you. Was he full of it and he was just bluffing? Or did he really have a plan? We just didn't see it on screen.
No.
Yeah, or he actually had a retrieval unit going out there looking. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it could have been fob. There had to have been some way of doing it, but it kind of reminded me of Jabba, like with Bib Fortuna, like, you fool. And basically, he made the call, hey, you're an idiot.
Right.
And then let's blow the place up.
Yeah. So they're pinned down. They've got death troopers, stormtroopers. There's an Imperial troop transport that shows up. I mean, everybody comes over there, shows up for all at the very the end there. And
more than 4.
What's that?
More than 4.
A lot more than 4. And awesome to see the behind the scenes stuff. We had heard the story that there was going to be real 501st people in one of these episodes, and when we saw that, I think it was at Celebration, they had mentioned this. And I think this is some of the scenes we had seen at Celebration last year as well. So it was finally cool to finally see the scene that we had heard so much about.
And quick tangent on that. It is really cool when the creators of something go out and reach into the fandom and say, hey, you guys really do this well. Do you want to be part of it? Well, and they're benefiting too, because they're saving money. Presumably they probably didn't pay these guys anything, maybe fed them lunch. And we have all these people who are going to show up. They're going to have screen accurate armor. They wanted to do their own stunts and stuff, I guess. I don't know.
Yep.
And they will actually play the part. And we don't really have to do anything. They just show up and they hang out, and it's a thing of a lifetime for them. And we get this huge benefit. So it was just really cool that they did that. I thought that was a really interesting thing to do with the fandom, and really embracing. And of course, the 501st does so much good with charities and whatnot. Right. So it was really great that they got some notoriety from that.
That'd be cool if they continue to do this, right? Maybe they open it up to the Mandos and the Republic, and there's a number of them out there, but that'd be really interesting to see them continue to exercise all that. So the last thing, I guess, is he mentions that that they're in possession of something that they're not aware of. He doesn't allude to exactly what that is. We assume that he means there's way more to this thing that they're even aware of at this point. Any thoughts around, and I know we've kind of talked about this a lot already over the course of this rewatch of season 1, but any final thoughts, I guess, if you will, on, I guess, the baby and what he is or what he could be, or the potential there, why he's wanted, especially by somebody like Moff Gideon?
Well, and I simplified Gideon's comments anyway of saying that maybe he doesn't think the Mandalorian knows what they have at all, like the abilities of the child, period.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is true, then really anything the child is capable of doing, and it apparently has manifested itself in some other ways before, or maybe they still have midichlorian counts somewhere with a Bic razor. But we can, sorry, I can't help myself sometimes. But so maybe he just already knows about these things, and he doesn't give the Mandalorian credit that they've actually experienced or seen these abilities before. And that's kind of all I chalked it up to, because I really didn't have any idea what else we could see from the child. I mean, clearly we will probably see something else that we don't know. I don't know if we'll see something new necessarily, but I don't know that I don't know if we'll see a new force power out of any of this to where it's going to shock us. because he's still a child.
Yeah.
So there's really only so much that we're probably going to allow him to do at this stage in his life.
Yeah. Just quickly.
I'm really surprised, Albert. Hold on. You didn't make any comment about the transport.
I know.
This is right up your alley.
I was giddy as a child when I saw that transport roll in. We'd seen it already in Rebels. Like they used it in Rebels quite a bit. And there's a really great. That's kind of like Daffy Duck
here.
Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
But there's a great sequence in Star Wars Rebels where what's his name? Ezra jumps on one of them and has a whole battle with it and everything. This is all kind of later on in the season. But anyways, yeah, it's been used before. I've always loved it. This was a design that was originally created. It was one of what's his name's original creations, and never got used in the original films. But yeah, it was great to see it all over again.
Well, and Kenner produced a toy, and people were like, "What is this thing? Like, this wasn't in the movie. Why are we getting this troop transport type of thing?"
And they re-released the toy too as part of the Mandalorian. Like you can go and pick it up now. So all good stuff.
But it was cool seeing it on the big screen.
Yeah. Conti had a question. She said, "Oops, very confused. Moff Gideon spoke to them while they were trapped in the bar and gave them until the sun went down as a deadline." And they do talk about this and they explain it just a little bit because you would think he opened fire on all of them already, just destroyed the whole bar, killed his client, didn't really care whatsoever. And the way this is explained is he doesn't know at this point, at least where the child is. And so he's going to give them until sundown in hopes that in talking with them, trying to get them to come out, give up information, whatever he's doing, he's going to play the psychological kind of war with them to try to get them to give up the location of the child. And that's why he does allow them to have a little bit more time. Otherwise, yeah, I would have just sent everybody in and say, get the child or kill all these people or whatever, but he needs them right now. And so he's being magnanimous and allowing more time there to, before he does kind of take the next steps there.
Right. And I think to expand on that, waiting for them to make a mistake, which the Mandalorian did.
Right.
They intercepted.
Yep.
Right. He reached out, intercepted communications, and now we've got a beat on it. Now I wish Gideon would have responded to that. Maybe he didn't know because he's outside the ship and doesn't really have any communications on him, presumably. But still, waiting for them to make a mistake, buying that time. It did seem a little bit silly because it's a little overplayed. I'm going to give you, I had like Back to the Future moments, like on the Old West. I'm going to give you until blah, blah, blah. And of when your deadline is, and it's like completely arbitrary and serves you usually zero purpose. But I think here though, it was, buying time, making sure that, when they do screw up, they can actually pinpoint where the child is at so they can go retrieve it if it's not with them. And if it's not with them, then okay, you have outlived your usefulness.
Right. So the only thing I'll add to, I know we're coming down to the final moments here, I promise, but the only thing I'll add to that question of what does Gideon know about the child that they may not, and why he's so important? The only other thing that I got from that, and this probably plays into a little bit, is I think he has an understanding. He probably feels like he has a better understanding, a better historic view of who the Jedi were, what the Force was, how all that worked. Right? He's in possession of a iconic sword, and he knows the history and what that sword's been through over the years. And I think from that perspective, I think he's telling him, look, you have no idea what you have here. You think it's just some child, and maybe he doesn't know that this child has already shown some of the capabilities that he has. And so I think part of it is just that. But I do think there is another level of this. I think there is somebody else that even Gideon reports up to that I think we'll find out a little bit later. And I think there is a bigger need for the child. He's a MacGuffin, right? For the most part. But I think we're going to find out exactly. I think that MacGuffin is actually going to turn into something later down the road.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and clearly he seems well educated about a variety of things. And I think that's a great point to make. We don't know about the Darksaber yet. So we don't know that he has a whole level of knowledge that we wouldn't expect from an Imperial.
Right.
But we do get a different vibe from him than we would from, any of the Imperials that we were exposed to, especially in original trilogy. Even though there were some who, were quite competent, no one seems to have his type of aura about him and his confidence, and clearly who has studied and knows what's going on and has spent some of that time doing it. Yeah. I mean, he just projects all of that, just radiates from him. But again, we don't know about the Darksaber yet, so we don't quite understand how much he might understand and know.
Yeah. I mean, if he's been talking to somebody like Thrawn, he may know a lot, because that's Thrawn's quite the historian when it comes to this stuff. So, the the final moments, obviously, Khalil is dead. He gets shot down by the scout troopers. We see him laying there. He's smoking. He's dead because he's buried in the next episode at the very end. Spoiler alert.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he's laying there with his little goggles and his hat and all that. So
It's really sad.
it is really sad. And I think he's a great character. I mean, I thought Nick Nolte did an awesome job with the voice acting here. And I don't remember if he was nominated or not, but that seems kind of tragic that he wasn't, if that turns out to be the case. But
I don't think he was. But I mean, this was really sad. Were you surprised when this happened?
yes, no, I thought he was going to be a character that I thought this would be the core team, and this core team would stay together and all that. I mean, it wasn't to the extent of like Rogue One, but it was. I was expecting for these main characters to stand out, especially since they gave us so much of him, and we really got to understand and sympathize for him and feel something with this character, given what he's been through and the hardships that he's been through over the course of his career. I thought they would keep him around, but I think it's just as powerful to maybe get rid of him too. I didn't have a problem with it, I guess.
Well, you really have to. I mean, it always means more if you really do feel like your main characters are in mortal danger, and that one of them can actually die or go through some significant change that really shakes the group to its core. And I think what was ended up being even sadder later on is that we lose both him and IG-11. So I think that's the part where Kuiil doesn't live on in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Through the skill of his hands or anything like that. That that while it has a payoff in that respect, we don't have any legacy necessarily for Kuiil. But it was really sad. I mean, again, he was a really likable character. I mean, his delivery of I've spoken is absolutely classic. Every single time he does it, it's end of discussion. We're done here. You go forth and do what I just told you to do. No questions. But it was a great character. And it was really, really sad. It was actually, you actually felt like emotional from it. That there's no. I remember when I watched it the first time, I was like, no, he's
going to get up.
He's going to be all right. He's going to be in rough shape, but he's going to survive. I kind of felt like this with Rio, like in Solo for a while. Like, they can't kill Rio. Rio's awesome. Like, why are we going to do this? But no, he did.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that was where we landed. I think it has a lot of meaning by staying dead because, again, we don't want to keep resurrecting, and we think we're already going to resurrect one character most likely in season 2. So it's good that that we keep him dead, but the emotional impact, the emotional weight was there. I thought that was important for us to have.
Yeah. And it definitely left us hanging, like wondering, holy crap, how am I going to get through the next 7 days waiting for the final episode to come out?
Yeah. And that's a fantastic point. Yeah. We finally have a legit cliffhanger, going into the season finale, which I thought was fantastic. And Deborah Chow, like, just nailed it right on the head. And I think overall Deborah Chow did a really good job with this episode. And we had a comment earlier. I can't remember who said it. I apologize. But they were going to miss Deborah Chow in season 2. And again, we don't see her name in the list of directors. I think we did get a comment on one of our previous, I think maybe Darth Went may have said that he may have seen, he or she did see Deborah Chow's name somewhere, but we didn't. So we're hoping she comes back. But, if not, that's sad to say because I think both of her episodes have been fantastic.
Yeah. They're both really good. And this was probably the better of the two, but that's not saying that the first one was bad, right? It was a really good episode.
Right.
All right. Well, that brings us to the very end of that episode and brings us to the end of this show. I mean, this is, again, that when people talk about The Mandalorian, we're talking about season 1. I usually tell them, watch and stick with it. It's going to pick up around the 3rd, 4th episode and wait till the very end. I think you're really going to like 7 and 8. And that seems to be what they're hearing from other people as well. But I think overall, season 1 is great. It's a phenomenal start, but I don't want to talk about that. We'll save that for the next episode.
Right, but I do want to ask you one question before we get into the finale. So when you get through 7 episodes, did it start to feel like this was the right length for a season for this show, for what we're saying? Did it start to feel, or did it feel like, oh, this is too many, or did it feel like, no, we really need more to fill in the blanks, or how did it start to feel? Was as we go into episode 8 or chapter 8, did it feel like, no, we're okay, this feels about right, or did you have some other thought?
I would say selfishly, I felt like they could have done 12 episodes, and maybe that was just me riding the high and enjoying it, and maybe not looking realistically in terms of cost, production, and the time that it took and all that. But then I thought, well, and again, this is me last year, or at least in December, thinking, well, maybe they'll maybe this will do so well, and it's been doing. At this point, it had been doing. I mean, it's phenomenal, right? Everybody was talking about it. It was all the rage and had bigger points and more favorable than the Rise of Skywalker. If you think about it across most of the Star Wars fandom. But I was thinking, okay, well, maybe they go into season 2 now with this, and they think, okay, well, let's expand it to 12 or let's expand it to 20, and it doesn't look like that's the case. Sounds like we're going to get about eight episodes. And interesting enough, today I think they announced, or at least someone dug up, they are going to start on chapter 9. So they're not going to restart and start over with chapter 1 for season 2. This will be just chapter 9 that comes out as the first episode. So, but yeah, I think I would have liked to have more episodes. I felt like there was definitely plenty that they gave us that they could have kept talking about with season 1. But I think anything less than 8, I would have felt short changed a little bit. But I was happy with it. I wasn't, kicking over cans or kicking rocks.
Okay.
What about you?
Just curious. Yeah, no, I thought. Yeah, I kind of felt like we were okay. I thought this felt like the right amount. Maybe could have got 10 and would have been all right still. But again, I'm okay with slightly tighter storytelling. We got a couple of what some people might consider filler episodes already. But again, they still progress the story overall in some different ways, which I thought was okay. I mean, they're like kind of little side quest type of things. But yeah, so I thought 8 was, as we get into this one, it felt like the right amount in order to get us to some sort of resolution for season 1 and leave us wanting some more as we get into the next series of chapters. I guess we got to stop calling it season 2, the next series of chapters.
Yeah, next series of chapters. All right. Well, with that, we're going to end the episode here. We'll be back next week for chapter 8, the redemption. We'll wrap this up, kind of give our final thoughts on season 1. And then, not to be outdone, we'll still be talking a little bit about Mando. So I do want to mention on October 4th, tentatively as it stands today, which would be our next show after that, that'll be episode 344. We are going to do a question and answer show. So it's been a while since we've done a Q&A show here, but you should see those start popping up on social media. You can email us your questions. You can post them on social medias. If you're into Discord and on our Discord server, there's a channel that we have there that you can go in and post questions. But we really want to kind of focus this on The Mandalorian as much as possible because we're right on the cusp of coming into season 2. So bring your Mandalorian questions and send those over to us. We'd love to answer them on here. And as always, if you're a Patreon member, you get first dibs. So if we get too many questions, we'll go with the Patreons first, and then we'll do the other questions right after that as well.
And who knows, since it's a live stream, if you happen to join the live stream and ask a couple of questions there, maybe we'll have the time to answer a few live on the air, which would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Get you to think on your feet a little bit.
Yeah, get us to think on our feet.
No,
what are you talking about? No,
I rely on you. You do all the mental lifting here.
No, I don't do that. Any of that stuff here. All right. Any final questions before we get out of here? Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, let's go for another round of Spotchka. Let's get out.
Okay, Spotchka all around for everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.